two-party system has controlled politics in the United States ever since its founding. It's what the Founding Fathers used in the late 1700s, and it's the same system we see today. This American political system has remained relatively constant in our 238-year history as a country. The presidential office has only ever seen 5 political parties: the Federalists, the Democratic Republicans, the Whigs, and the 2 parties we know today, the Democrats and the Republicans. Now, while these presidents from each of these parties were able to peacefully pass the power from one party to another, the problems that arose while these leaders were in office due to the two-party system began a long struggle in this never-ending political battle. And that brings us to the main purpose of this video, to show how the two-party system has hindered American politics through 3 distinct eras of our country's political history: post-revolution, Civil War, and the turbulent 1960s. Well, what exactly started this two-party system that we know so well today? The first 2 American political parties originated from the drafting of the Constitution. Hamiltonians, or better known as Federalists, wanted the Constitution ratified, and they were in favor of a loose interpretation of the document once it was passed. On the other hand, Jeffersonians, or Anti-Federalists, did not want the states to ratify the Constitution, but when it passed into law, they favored a strict interpretation of the document. Hamilton believed in a strong federal government, while Jefferson believed in a decentralized government that only acted to protect man's natural rights to life, liberty, and most importantly, property. Overcommitment to political parties is already beginning to occur at this point, as both Jefferson and Hamilton are advocating for their own political ideologies despite the desires of their constituents. George Washington, President of the Constitutional Convention, was adamantly opposed to political parties and provided a warning for the trouble they would produce, saying, "The alternate domination of one faction over another, sharpened by the spirit of revenge, natural to party dissension, which in different ages and countries has perpetrated the most horrid enormities, is itself a frightful despotism." So, it was the Constitution that in many ways created the first 2 American political parties, and in the process started the trend of a splitting division in our politics, despite the warning of arguably our greatest political leader ever. As the 19th century progressed, the Democratic and Republican parties developed with the changing of the times, but remained relatively constant. On the eve of the American Civil War, 3 noteworthy parties existed in the country: the Republicans, who were in favor of immediate freeing of the slaves; the Know-Nothings, who largely opposed immigration but had relatively minor influence on the other 2 parties; and the Democrats, who, during the Civil War, epitomized the struggle of the two-party system. As the pivotal presidential election of 1960 approached, Abraham Lincoln planned to run as a Republican. He desired the preservation of the Union and opposed the spread of slavery. The pre-Civil War Democratic Party, on the other hand, was a bit more complicated. In the years leading up to the Civil War, the Democrats enjoyed significant power, but their authority began to decrease with the split of the party in the 1850s over the issue of slavery. Some sections of the party in the North supported the abolitionist cause, other sections of the party in the North supported the accommodation of the South, and sections of the Democratic Party in the South supported the spread of slavery. Obviously, there was a great amount of dispute among Democratic Party members before the Civil War. This caused the Southern and Northern Democrats to nominate separate candidates for president, giving Lincoln an advantage and ultimately an easy victory in the presidential election of 1860. The two-party system presented one of its problems with the 1860 presidential election. The Democratic Party was forced to accommodate for the varying political views of the time, resulting in several Democratic candidates running for office, eventually giving the Democrats no chance of victory. Because of the differing views that the Democrats held at the time, the Democratic Party was not able to effectively represent its constituents, a key issue that the two-party system produces. By the time that the 1960s rolled around, the 2 parties, Democrats and Republicans, had, in a sense, completely switched sides. The Northern Republicans of the Civil War were in favor of the growth of the federal government's power, while the Democrats of the South were opposed to such actions. But at this point in our history, liberal Democrats were and still are largely located in the North, while conservative Republicans are largely located in the South. This is a testament to the continuity of the two-party system. Even though the parties change over the years, there continues to exist only 2 significant ones. 100 years after the start of the Civil War, we come to the presidential election of 1960 between frontrunners Richard Nixon, Republican, and John F. Kennedy, Democrat. Nixon, the former vice president under Dwight Eisenhower, was young but rather experienced. Kennedy, a senator from Massachusetts, would be the youngest president ever if elected. There were several key issues facing the candidates in the year or two leading up to 1960, including the threat of the spread of communism from Russia, China, and neighbor Cuba, as well as the push for a standardizing Civil Rights Act. What's both interesting and innovative about the 1960 election is the route the two candidates took in their campaigns. This presidential election was among the first in American history to feature negative campaigning of the opponent. The most notable of these negative campaigning tactics was an advertisement developed by Kennedy's supporters that included then-President Eisenhower, who, in the ad, spoke negatively of Nixon, his vice president. While this ad did serve to increase Kennedy's overall popularity and drastically decrease Nixon's, the effects of this negative propaganda were largely hurtful. Kennedy was not able to further promote himself as a candidate with this ad. Rather, he only focused on targeting the weaknesses of his opponent, only drawing Nixon down and making little progress in the campaign. Negative campaigning is a major disadvantage that the two-party system creates because with two major parties, there is always one equal and opposite opponent to criticize and attack, encouraging the negative publicity candidates and representatives produce for their opponents. As our country has progressed through its history, from the founding of the nation to our largest and most dividing conflict, to the turmoil of the 60s, and even to now, the two-party system has remained commonplace in our politics. It is remarkable to note how such a troublesome political system that evidently produces multiple issues has endured through such hardship in our nation's history.